Do you have any explanation how it took 71 games for the Leafs to get a 5-on-3?
No, I actually don't. I heard that stat last night too, and I mean the amount of hockey I watch and the games I cover and the amount of teams that I've or rinks I've been in this year, it just kind of I feel like that's an outlier. Like it's a weird stat. I look at the way that the Leafs play too. They're not a very physical team. They're more. I mean, now actually they are, but let's go back to 4 weeks ago or less. They play more of a speed and kind of non-engaging game. For me, you would think that there'd be a penalty and they're on the power play and then a tripping call or a cross-checking in front of the net down to make it a 5-on-3, or even somebody like even by accident. Okay, let's say they're on the power play and the defenseman goes to fire it off the glass and he fires it into the stands. Like it's not even a ref's decision, it's a black and white decision, like over the glass. Like, so that is a weird stat for me, that it took that long because I don't know who's had the most. I don't know. I haven't dug into it, but you would think at least a handful of times, let's say 5 times in the season, you'd get a 5-on-3. So that one's a weird one. And yeah, they converted, and it was a weird play even leading up to it because Bobrovsky makes the big left pad save on the back door, and then he gets run into by his own D-man, and then Bunting. I don't think Bunting got all of that. To be honest, I thought it was like he got lucky on that play because he fires it straight. Now you want to fire it quick, but he fires it through Bobrovsky, where I would think if he had a clean shot, you'd probably want to elevate it on that play. But anyways, found the back of the net. They converted on a 5-on-3. And to answer your question, even by accident, they should have had a 5-on-3 somewhere along the line this year.
Noodles, bring us to the conversation that you're obviously very well versed in, but the goaltending situation in Toronto, what's been your take on it going back to the summer, getting these two guys, the way they've switch hit them, their play over the last little while, and now obviously a big step up game for Matt Murray last night?
I mean, I think I'm like everybody else in Toronto. You're concerned until you don't have to be concerned. So, the turnover of goaltenders, I had a spirited debate, put it that way, with somebody yesterday saying, you if it didn't work, you change and you change. Well, my question is, and I would pose it to everybody listening and both you too, is we don't have the luxury of sample size with either guy. So I have a little bit more watching Ottawa. So I saw Matt Murray play the last couple of years. I've been an advocate of his. When he's healthy, he's a good goaltender. Like, you don't forget how to play goal. He's won cups. He's a good tandem goaltender. He's not a starter, in my opinion. He's a tandem guy who, his body breaks down a little bit. Like he's at the most, I think he had a 3-year stretch. It was like 49, 50, 49, something like that in Pittsburgh. But that's not really starter minutes. That's tandem minutes. Samsonov, most he's ever played in a season is 44. So you've got two guys with something to prove. Samsonov is 26 years old, and he's a high draft pick. I talked to goaltender coaches early on when he was drafted that they really liked his skill set. I think it took him a while to mature physically and mentally. Washington, there's a reason why they walked away from him. It might not have just been his play. There was probably some maturity issues there or whatever it is. But the point being is both of these guys were a reclamation project, we'll call it, because it was at Christmas that Matt Murray was on waivers in Ottawa the year prior. So my only thing, and I always come back to, and I know it's long-winded, is one word: trust. Because do you trust that will all come together at the right time? Where, for example, in other markets where you've had a tandem or you've had the goaltenders for more than 1 year, maybe 2 or 3 years, you go, I've seen the guy at his best, I've seen him at his worst, and now we just need him to play his best at the right time. Like even, Markstrom, for example, like I've watched Jacob Markstrom for years. So okay, there's a really good goaltender in there that's not having a great season. So when I look at Samsonov, if you haven't watched him in Washington and didn't know his body of work, if you're a Leaf fan, you're going, I really like what I see this year. But again, it's on a sample size of 33 games, and that could change very quickly. So that's the only thing I come back to. I think both of them are really good goaltenders and capable of doing the work. when they're healthy and when they're at the top of their game. But the question is, do I trust that that can happen at the right time when it's needed? I don't have that answer for you. That would be my analytical breakdown, because I haven't seen Samsonov go through a stretch where it's like, how does this guy dig himself out of a slump? How does he respond to a bad game? You know, I didn't love his game in the island the other night, but you guys talked about it, and I listened to you earlier, where it's like you guys shredded them after that island game. It stunk, top to bottom. You couldn't circle
Yeah.
anybody who played well, including Samsonov. So how does he respond? He has 2 or 3 bad games. It was not that long ago, with about 6 weeks ago, that both goaltenders were kind of struggling. And Samsonov was struggling. I don't know if Murray was healthy or whatever. And you're sitting there going, what the hell's wrong with the goaltending in Toronto? So I think it all comes to timing. And I just don't have a reference point other than what we've seen in front of us this year to go, God, I hope it all comes together at the right time.
And of course, one of the big conversations, as you know, doing overdrive on a daily basis is the goaltending conversation, as we just referenced. Who starts game one? I almost ask you this, like, does it matter most, like, who's easier to pivot to? Like, in my world, and I know Jackie Redmond was on the show last week, and she made a really, really good observation and point. It's almost, in her opinion, in my opinion as well, easier to shift to Matt Murray than it would be like vice versa, where you start Murray and then you go to the unproven guy in Samsonov. Do you agree with that?
I think yes, on a couple different fronts. Is I just talked about the body of work. The more stable goaltender this season, as far as what we've seen consistently, has been Samsonov's body of work, because we had Murray not available. We've seen a couple dips in his play. There's been, if you had a chart, as O-Dog always talks about the graphs. If you had the graph would go up and down with Matt Murray, where Samsonov, there was an injury, but to come back, he's been pretty stable. So in your mind, coming back to the word trust, I think you're like, okay, you kind of believe or know what you think you're going to get from Samsonov. And if not, you've got a safety blanket on a guy who's played at the highest level and exceeded the highest level, like that you believe that one of them can get it done. And I don't know if you could leave, which is a kind of a crazy theory, talking to somebody yesterday, like, would Joseph Wall be a guy that you're just like, okay, like, if it's not working or whatever, like, throw the rookie in there who's oblivious and just be like, let's see if this kid can go on a Binnington run type of thing. That's a far kind of conspiracy outside the box theory, but stranger things have happened. And when I look at it, and you guys can probably cite other examples, sometimes ignorance is bliss. There's a reason why rookies in the league kind of have that kind of success out of nowhere, because they don't know the pressure. They don't know. It's just like, hey, I'm showing up. I'm in the NHL. I'm pretty excited. Like, they haven't experienced years of like ups and downs and pains and crowd getting on you and stuff. It's just like, hey, I'm coming from junior. I'm coming from the minors. I'm pretty oblivious to what's going on here. I'm just going to play some hockey. I kind of think like Binnington did that from January on in St. Louis. Binnington's biggest problem, I think, in the playoffs that year was he had a racist tweet or something he had to deal with, like something ridiculous. Yeah, do you remember that? I think he had to answer for it on the morning of like, I don't know if it was cup final or semifinals or something. It was like somebody went back and when he was a kid and dug up a tweet about I don't even remember what it was, but they were asking about him. And he was like, yeah, mistake, all of that type of stuff. He wasn't even talking about his play. It was just like, hey, what did you do when you were 16, 18? So again, ignorance is bliss sometimes, but I would say Samsonov, you give him the net. If he falters, you got a guy who's been there, done that before. And I would argue probably if they do end up getting past Tampa, if they end up, we're thinking Boston, if Boston continues on, like you might need both guys, to be honest. You might need both guys to get through, because we've seen tandems or one outside of the Vasilevsky situation. You look at cup winners, there's been 2 goaltenders that have actually started games.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, being as we've talked a lot on this show about how goaltenders just seem to not be able to even do back-to-back games, which is, I'm sure, is laughable to guys like you and the era that you played in. But if we do get in with, say, we start with whoever we start with, do you think there is a chance that if things go well, that a one goalie could just play the entire series, or do you think there's no chance that happens?
Well, I think it should be in my mind. If you've got a guy who's playing well and the team's playing well, rallying around him, this is the thing. And it's an analogy that was brought to me about football. It's like if you have two capable quarterbacks, you really don't have a one. And what happens is if one guy falters, everyone's like, well, you should have started the other guy. And that's what scares me about tandems. Because let's say Samsonov starts game one, plays really well, and they win. And then he struggles in game two. You know how loud it's going to be to go, we got to go the other guy because, boy, he stunk last night. But yet, Austin Matthews or Mitch Marner may have had an off night. They get to go right back on the ice next game. So sometimes when you don't have 100% faith in one, you're always second guessing that decision as to like, okay, well, do you give that guy who had an off night an opportunity to make up for it, or do you go to the other guy and see if he can climb on top of it? That's the game within the game when it comes to goalies, and that's kind of scary for me. But I would like to see a guy go on a run and feel good. So you just go, that's our guy. And if he falters or and you know what it's like now in the playoffs, they're not back-to-back situations. And you guys are laughing like, yeah, do I know about back in the day? Kiprasov, 7 years in a row at 70-plus games. You look at my stats in Florida. Roberto Luongo, the year I backed him up, he played 75 games. I pretty much could have sat in a suit. I literally sat in a suit on the bench because I knew I wasn't going in. Like that was like that's a unicorn now. And even near the end of his career, I talked to Roberto about playing back-to-back situation. He said the game is so much more physical now. Like as far as for a goaltender, it's side to side, it's in tight play, it's up down. So he said the recovery, he could never get back to 100% right in that back-to-back situation. He was talented enough to do it, to battle through to maybe a one-off here and there, but he couldn't do it. The only guy I could see that has like the strength, there's a couple of them. Vasilevsky can do it. Hellebuck can do it. And I think Markstrom can do it. These big goaltenders that have that physical strength, they can do that type of stuff.
Noodles, I still maintain we need a goaltending summit in this league because I don't know what's transpired with the position, but you do make some excellent points. The back end, what are your thoughts on load management? We saw Giordano sit, we've seen Brody sit, and why do the Leafs continue to win without Morgan Riley in the lineup?
Because I think they're a balanced defensive core. It doesn't matter. Let's just say their pathway is Tampa, Boston. On paper,
yeah,
those defensive core, both your opponent's defensive cores are better on paper. Doesn't mean that execution. But I mean, I watched Boston live the other night. If you believe Morgan Riley's your number one, which we do, Morgan Riley might be number 4 on Boston, behind Lindholm, McAvoy, and Orlov. I think there's an argument between Orlov and Riley, but Orlov's a hell of a player. So you're going to do it by committee. Tampa, I mean, there's no Hedman. Now, I watched Hedman last night. He looks like he's laboring. His back looks like something's up there. So, he's going to probably try and conserve for health better more than trying to win games down the stretch here. But I look at their defensive core. Like that Sergachev is a player. Chernak is a big meat. Like they've got a really unique group back there because everyone plays a different role. Where I look at the Leafs, and you've got Riley, you got Brody, who's a real stable guy who moves the puck, but he's not overly physical. He's just a really cerebral defenseman. You mentioned load management with Gio. I'm 51 years old. I played with Gio. Gio's 39. You need to rest him. And I love Mark Giordano. Like he's a captain, he's a leader, he's an unbelievable person. But does he need to play, in every situation? No. He needs to play when it matters, and he'll come to play. He's a gamer. I'm not worried about him. McCabe, I think, needs to still settle in, find his game. You know, there's times where I think he's trying to do too much. The new situation, you're excited, you get a little horny, you want to be like, oh, I can do this, I can do that. I think we just shrunk his game a little bit, and it's like, this is what I'm good at. He'll be fine. Liljegren, like that right side, kind of always concerned me a little bit because you know Hall, Liljegren's a guy like I don't know where his perfect placement is. And I know it's a great story. And Jay, I don't know if you played with him or know, you know, Shan, like he's a great human, big mutant, but like it's like, you know, he's a six. Like he's a six at best for me. Like so, I think they're going to do it by committee, and I'm fine with load management, but to me, Riley's got to be a big part of it because if he's going to chew minutes, he's got to be a guy who can advance the puck, get back to the puck quickly, and move it. I think their defense has to be like Pittsburgh's defense when they won. I think the first time around without Letang, it's got to be by committee, move the puck quick, and just get it to people who can handle it. Like just be nothing to see here, back out and go away type of thing.
We've been talking about that too, and I think the load management with like a Giordano, of course, makes sense. You want to keep him healthy, and a guy's body's not going to hold up like a 22-year-old's. But at what point do you think they need to start figuring out what they're going to move forward with in the playoffs? I mean, especially if they're playing, you know, not great hockey, like say they were in Long Island. I mean, you're seeing a revolving door of defensemen. No one's got the same partner twice. And it's almost like the mistakes that were being made is like, are these guys gripping their stick saying one mistake and I'm going to be in the press box tomorrow? Not exactly instilling confidence leading into the playoffs. At what point do you think they need to start solidifying the roster that they're going to go into the postseason with?
I think it has to happen now. Like I think the argument can be made is, yeah, you've got the luxury after the trade deadline to tinker with things. Again, I know I've beaten a dead horse here, but you watch Boston, for the most part, outside of injury or, you know, guys being banged up and stuff like that, they all play with the same guys. You know, you tinker a little bit. You know, on a given night, if a guy's not going, yeah, you sit him down a shift, you move a guy up and down. That's game management, the game within the game. But like hockey is habitual, it's instinctual. So if I've got a defensive partner that has certain habits, you don't want to think about, okay, well, I'm with that guy, he likes to do this. Because the minute you start to think on the ice, you're screwed. The game's too fast. So I would like to see some stability where it's like, here's a 5-game segment. This is what the team looks like outside of sickness and injury, and have at it. Like go. And then you start to tinker and go, okay, that matchup, they weren't going tonight. I had to pull this guy in and out. But like for the most part, I want to see consistency because I see plays that are set plays and pick your team. Colorado, you know, even Edmonton. Like I look at teams like that offensively, they've got set plays where it's like, I just know where that guy is going to be. Well, defensemen need that too. I talked to Mark Mathot the other day. I had dinner with him in the media room in Ottawa. And I said, like, playing with different partners, how hard is it? And he goes, well, you're worried about your game, but you're also worried about what this guy likes, what he doesn't like, how he likes to be set up, how he likes to defend. So if you don't have that familiarity, now it takes away from your game because you're going, I got to worry about my game and worry about what's good for him. And I haven't played with him a lot. So I think getting back to your question, you need to lock the roster in and have a run with these guys so that they feel comfortable and it's just second nature, habitual.
If they do that, I don't know what else we're going to talk about leading into the Stanley Cup playoffs because we like to make up stories this time of year. You know that, Noodles. Appreciate your time today, man. Never. No, because it literally gets to a point after the deadline, like people try to find a reason to bitch about this team, right?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's the passionate part of this market. It's just like, I was arguing, I know we got to go. I was arguing with somebody last night. They're like, well, you know, like Boston, you can beat them. And I'm like, okay, what? Well, they're due for something. And I go, what is that rationale? Due for what? Like, you know, like, anyways, it just, you know how passionate this market is. I think it's awesome. And to your point, like we do need to create things to get ourselves excited because right now we're just waiting for the playoffs.